I'm waiting. Okay, we are live.
Cool. The timer is started. Hello, everybody. This week's focus is going to be defining ethics as a group, exploring how ethics shape leadership and how ethical behavior is reflected in public leadership. So maybe we can start as a starting point is just talk about as a group. What comes to your mind when you think about ethics, whether it's in a company or outside of a company, to you as a person? What are ethics?
I think ethics of as someone's moral code and how they, go about their lives in the way that they choose to make decisions or choose to do things.
Okay. Anyone else? I have something to say too, which is I think ethics is defining like what it's coming together as a group is like defining like what's right versus what's wrong. Like I think most of us can agree that like probably going into what is like the most common one, like going into a movie theater and yelling like, "Oh my God, fire, fire!" That's not ethically right. Like you wouldn't do that. I mean, maybe there's a law for that, but you wouldn't do that. Nor would you like just take a, if you're like, oh, I can't take care of these dogs anymore, let me just let them loose on a forest. Like, I think we can agree that's not ethically right. So ethics to me is like coming together as a consensus. Like, what do we do? What versus like what's not right.
I also go and think that ethics is very strongly tied to morals. So, what is morally right? What is morally wrong? And if it's morally right, then it's ethical. If it's morally wrong, it's unethical.
But when you get into morals, you get into cultural biases as well. So, like the example with the dogs aren't revered in the same way in other cultures. Some cultures eat them. Like, they're not any different than, chickens or anything else that we normally eat. So there's definitely cultural things that play into ethics. There are some things that I think are pretty universal. But then, I mean, even in the business world, there are some cultures where bribery of, city officials and things like that are the norm. If you go into that culture and you don't do that, your business is going to fail. So you may come there with this moral idea from your original culture where you're originating from and try to imply those ethics there, and it's not going to go over, and you're not going to change the system, their ethical system. So do you choose then to not operate in that system at all because you don't agree with their ethics? Do you operate your way in their system knowing that you probably will fail? Or do you go ahead and bend your ethics or change them in one environment to the next? So these are huge ethical dilemmas that business leaders need to address, especially if their businesses are cross-cultural.
Well, you make a really good point is that in my job, there's a lot of people I actually deal with that are from other countries. My lab manager actually is from Morocco. And also there is someone we work that he's not in our office, but he's in frequently, who's actually from Peru. Now, something I've noticed with both of them, but the man from Peru is a little bit more extreme, but that's because he's been only in the U.S. for probably maybe 10 years, and he's like probably like 65, is that there is a very strong like bias towards men. So if you have women in the workplace, it is not exactly considered correct. Women as leaders in South American countries is not considered a good thing. And so I find a lot of times with dealing with them, even though they've been, I'm working in the United States, that I have to take their cultural bias into play and figure out how I can make that work into my own my job and to be able to get my job done without having additional conflicts.
Right. And so our culture, our ethics is based a lot on egalitarianism and the idea that everyone has a certain set of rights, regardless of your status, your gender, your sexual identity, your race, these things. We have this idea, but that's not necessarily true in other cultures. Is that and when that leads to an ethical issue, I mean, I guess that can lead to an actual ethical issue, but I don't know whether that's ethics in and of itself. But that's super interesting point.
Belinda, what do you think about ethics?
When I think of ethics, I think of, like, for example, if I were a leader, I would think of things that are important to my followers, that aligns with them, for example, and not doing things that would disrespect them or make them feel uncomfortable. Like, I would never ask anyone to do something that they didn't feel was ethically right. Then I feel like that I would be, what's it called? Then I would be like crossing a line as the leader, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. That's what it gets tough to be a leader, is like it's trying to find the right balance of like your ethical morals versus like the company's, versus like you want to do something like you're saying, you don't want to make someone do something that they don't feel is ethically right, but like what if the company and the leader don't line up, or like in terms of like what would be right? Then that's like, oh, which way do you go? I mean, obviously you're going to be like, I have to do my job to make sure I keep my boss happy, but then you don't want to make yourself unhappy or make someone else that works under you unhappy. So it's a tough balance to find.
Yeah, totally. Especially because not a lot of people have the same ethical viewpoints. Same thing with like moral viewpoints. And like you said, Kimberly, at the beginning, there is like a line between the two of them that makes them very similar, but at the same time very different from, one another. And it's like sometimes difficult to confuse them, because you can think, oh, like ethics and morals, those are like the same thing. It's like doing, the right thing for yourself and others. But again, like you said, culturally, it's completely different at times.
Mm-hmm. What about when we talk about, I think the second one is how ethics shape leadership. So our third question maybe is how ethical behavior is reflected in public leadership. How do you guys interpret that question?
Yeah, but I'm like trying to think of how am I interpreting that right now? I'm gonna think about that.
That sounds almost the same to me, like how ethics shape leadership and how ethical behavior is reflected in public leadership. So maybe what do leaders do to do the right ethical thing? Maybe, I mean, that's why I'm interpreting that question. What do you all think?
Some of what I was thinking about just when I was reflecting on that portion of this prompt had to do with how much our public leaders are public now, and how much they're exposed because of social media, because of media. It's 24 hours now. I mean, there's 24-hour news sources everywhere, the internet, the television, everything, and we're bombarded with it. So every decision that these people make, and these are people with enormous amounts of power, and I feel like the more power you have, the more opportunities you have to have gross ethical breaches, whereas someone with not a lot of power can have kind of a minute ethical breach, but their ethical breach isn't going to affect hordes of people, whereas someone with a lot of power, when they have an ethical breach or make an ethical decision one way or another, it affects so many more people. And people that are, I guess my big thing is just thinking about how much every little bit of their decisions are in the media and are public, and how vulnerable those people are, and how much that would really suck.
Yeah, they definitely do have more responsibility in that sense. Sorry, Jordan, go ahead.
You guys both make a point. Like, they do have a lot of responsibility, because there was another class I was taking where we were studying ethical behavior like across the globe, and there's one study I did. I think it was like Shell gas station, or Shell, the company, the oil company, and like they had like an oil pipe leak or whatever somewhere off the coast of Madagascar, and it was like killing like thousands of wildlife, like disrupting the whole ecosystem. And Shell was just like, okay, we'll pay you off, and we'll pay you for the damages. But it's like, well, that's not ethically right. Like, you should have either taken care of it when it broke in the first place. You can't just pay someone money and be like, sorry, we ruined your ecosystem. So it's like you two both make a point, is leaders have so much responsibility to do the right thing, and when they don't do the right thing, like, you have to like own up to it and make the right decision, like, or fix that situation, not just be like, here's money, take the money and go.
Yeah, like actually in the reading it says like acknowledge and try to correct the ethical problems, and just paying people off is not correcting that at all.
Do you
well, also you're going and talking about like the oil spill in Madagascar, but if you even go to the fact of the one that was much closer to home off the coast of Texas, the BP oil spill, I mean, that was the same thing. It was a huge ethical issue. If you happen to watch the movie, I can't think of the name of it right now, that was based on the entire event, it showed in there all the things that management let go because they were more concerned about making money and pushing the system as hard as they could possibly versus doing the correct thing, fixing the problem so that they didn't actually end up having the issue of the huge spill and all the issues that came with it.
Yeah. Daphne, you've been quiet tonight.
Sorry.
Anything to add? I don't want to put you on the spot.
Sorry. Yeah.
And I have a question then. Maybe Daphne, you can answer this
Yeah.
question. It'll be for the incident that we had with Starbucks in Philadelphia. I mean, Starbucks' response was to have us do the sensitivity training.
Yeah.
You can answer this first, and maybe we can go around. And do you think that was the right decision with a response to Philadelphia? I mean, I think that was a good decision because not just looking at it like from a Starbucks point of view, the training we did wasn't just for like us to go back to our store and spit out what we learned, but I think that's a good decision for things we can talk about like as a country. We're a diverse country, so to like go around and spread that message. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was great for them to kind of just show the public that they do care about, the concerns that they have, and they also want to help educate the partners. I mean, I guess you can go into a whole bunch, like not everyone was in agreement with it. I mean, I definitely appreciated the thought that they put behind it and the fact that they cared enough to want to educate their partners and do better.
I thought in that incident, I think what was really, really remarkable was the reaction of the two gentlemen who were harmed in that incident. I mean, they were embarrassed and like publicly embarrassed by that whole incident, and that was awful, but they turned it around and took no money for themselves, really, like $1 or whatever for the settlement, and then set up this foundation, like is it a college scholarship fund or something? I can't remember specifically, but set up something good in the universe out of that terrible thing that happened. So, I mean, you want to talk about an awesome ethical public leader. Those are the public leaders that can be applauded out of that as well. I mean, I think it was awesome what Starbucks did, and I think it was good that they came out and took responsibility and made efforts to rectify the situation. But the parties that were harmed in that situation were, I think, the biggest stand-up party in that. I think that really shone for me.
Yeah, I didn't even know that, Kimberly. Thanks for mentioning that. I had no clue.
There was like a settlement. The city had to settle with them, and they originally the two gentlemen, the individuals, only took like $1 each out of the settlement, and then they set up a scholarship fund or something like that for, I believe, minority students. So it's amazing.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah.
To create something good out of something bad is just amazing to me.
Yeah. I mean, how many people would like just take the money, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, I'm a little bit on the other side of the story. I mean, I'm not a Starbucks employee, but the general look from that I have on this is that in general, it would, if a person is someone who has a prejudice bias, no matter how much training you do, you're never going to change that person's mind. And it's all comes down to the point of morally what kind of people are working for you, being able to identify the people that do not go and portray the proper image for your company, and letting them go because they're not going to do the things that you need them to do no matter what.
Exactly. And that ties back in a previous chapter where we talked about attaching a conflict to the behavior and not necessarily to the person and things like that. And when there is an instance of bias and prejudice, like in that incident in Philadelphia, identifying this is the behavior that was not correct, calling the cops on people because they didn't order coffee before the rest of the party was there, that's ridiculous, and bye-bye. Tying that to the behavior instead of necessarily saying you're a racist. I think that was important, and that goes with what you're saying.
We have 30 seconds left until we reach 17 minutes, which is enough time. Anyone have any final thoughts on ethics that they want to spit out or anything to share?
I feel like I underlined something, so I just want to see. Maybe not. Yeah. No, I'm good. I was just kind of looking over the different like virtue ethics and altruism and things like that, and just kind of curious about people's stances. But I've taken a lot of ethics classes.
Okay, well then, that is our time. We'll see each other next week.
Yeah, next week. Bye, guys.
That works.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.